Welcome, welcome. In this lesson, we'll go over building the rotor, caliper, and the wheels for our game ready model. We'll build the high detail version of the wheel. I'll go over the techniques to build that, and techniques to do the low polygon game ready version as well. Currently, I'm here in Photoshop, and I've got some reference images up, stuff that I grabbed off the web. And so there's different styles of calipers. You can build the one that you'd like. Different styles of wheels as well. This is the one that I chose. And the rotor is pretty simple. And the wheel and caliper, we can use similar techniques that we've covered to build those out. So these are my reference images, and I've got quite a bit more, but these are just the ones I threw together. I also have here a cross section of a tire. And what you can do with this is basically build out the geometry. And then there's a technique that you could use in 3D Studio Max to get like a highly detailed tire. And of course, we'd eventually bake our maps from that. But I have this here as another option because the option I'll be showing you is pretty simple and straightforward. All right, so we'll just hop back into our 3D program here. All right, so we're in 3D Studio Max, and I've chosen the image that I'm going to use for my wheel, and I've got it set up. Same thing for my caliper and the rotor as well. And as I mentioned, the rotor is pretty simple. So you could use maybe an extended primitive, a chamfer cylinder. And once you drag and draw to create it, it's in your viewport, and then you just set the fillet. Maybe about 20 or so, see what that gets us. And we're just trying to have an edge. I'll set it to about 50. We're trying to have an edge where the light will catch and we'll get like a pretty nice reflection there. Sides, you could set that to about 24. And that would pretty much be all we needed. You could do cleanup because we're only going to see one side, so you can add an edit poly modifier and do away with those back faces there. You could also just do away with that. And that's pretty much it. Everything else, I'll hop back into Photoshop really quickly. Everything else that you see on the rotor itself, the dots and the smearing from friction and all that, we could create those in texture. So all we'd need is the base geometry. We'd create a texture map and just map this texture to what we made here in our 3D app. Alrighty, and so I've got that. I'll just drag that away. The next thing we do here is, as far as the rotor is concerned, we'd be using similar techniques that we covered earlier, whereas I'll just start out with maybe a plane, and we'll edge model this. I'll apply an edit poly modifier, and now what I'll do is I'll just go in, add some divisions, and I'll just start building everything out. One thing to note here is, and I'll just go ahead and unfreeze my plane, is when you're building this, my reference image here is set at an angle. It's always a good idea to just go in, rotate it, or try to find images where it's sitting in a straight on position, kind of like this. And that just makes it easier to drag your edges. You'd never want to be building at an angle or on a corner unless you absolutely have to. It's better to build the object in place in a normal position and then just move everything, rotate everything as needs be. And so for this, it would basically be going in, adding in loops, moving edges to sort of match what's going on here. Similar to how we fleshed out the body of the car. And again, with the caliper, I'd go for getting the main shape. I wouldn't worry about too many of the small details. The only other area I would build in is I would cut in the geometry for this sort of groove area here. Then I'd go in Of course, tweak my verts, and then just move my edges. I'll go ahead and turn off X-ray mode so we can see what we've gotten that far. And there we have it. And what I do here, of course, is just continue by cutting across my edges so I can see where they're needed. For this, we would subdivide it once we're done with the modeling. And so that's how I'd go about doing the caliper. For the wheel itself, this one is a little trickier. But I'd start out with a cylinder. And I'd make it X-ray. You know, I'd enable X-ray mode with Alt-X, make it so that we can see through it. And what I do here is I'd actually go in and rotate it so that we have sort of a line going across. I'll turn on my grid so I can see what's going on here. I'm trying to get a line going straight across that sort of sits on my center grid line there. And that should work more or less. And so the other thing I do is make sure I've got enough sides in here for us to work with. Because what we're going to do is just take these spaces here, delete everything else, and move our verts to kind of conform to what we're seeing here. So I'd add an edit poly modifier. And I'd go to face selection, select these faces, invert my selection, delete everything else. Let me turn my grid off, and now we'd be ready to rock and roll. Next thing I do here is just add loops for all my main areas. Then I'd switch to vertex mode and start pushing and pulling my verts to conform to what I've got going on here. And so once I've done that, I go back in, drop some verts here, and just continue editing everything. I'll just go in and delete because of course there won't be anything here. I'll just continue editing everything here until I've got the shape that I was looking for. So kind of like so. And as is the norm by now, it's just basically going in, pushing, and pulling vert. And so what I'll do is I'll just pause for a second here, and because there's something else I want to show you on this wheel, and then we'll jump back in a few seconds. Alrighty, so here we are with everything sort of mapped out, and what I wanted to show was basically just grabbing all of these bottom faces here. And then we could simply add a symmetry modifier. And it might take a little tweaking to get it to work the way we want it to. But you can always rotate it. And so we'd add our symmetry modifier. And so what we'd have here now, let me go ahead and freeze my reference image planes there. So what we'd have here is this. Then I'd simply just hop back into Photoshop, look at my reference, see what I'm dealing with, hop back into my 3D program, and of course, there's a whole area here that sort of sinks down. So it'd just be a matter of hopping back in 3D Studio Max and adjusting things to your liking. These actually come up. We'd go through and adjust those. And the key here, I assigned the edit poly modifier to show you what the process there would be. But the key here would be to get everything done on this level. You know, all your extrusions and stuff like that on this level before we go ahead and do our mirror so that we can have all that information just repeat across our line of symmetry here. Alrighty, that's it for now. Please join me in the next lesson where we'll wrap everything up for these parts of the car. Thank you very much.